Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Big Three, the podcast where we unpack the biggest stories, insights, and shifts shaping influencer marketing and the creator economy. I'm your host, Ceci. Today's episode is a guest conversation, and joining us today is Sabrina Haschak, Head of Partnerships at Beacons, the all-in-one platform that helps creators manage their businesses, from linking bio storefronts and audience monetization to brand partnerships and creator tools. Sabrina has spent close to 2 decades working across traditional media, agencies, and now creator tech. She's been in rooms with brands before creator marketing was taken seriously, through the pandemic when everything exploded, and now in a moment where creator marketing is everywhere. We wanted to talk to Sabrina because she understands how brands think, how they make decisions, how budgets actually get approved, and at the same time, she deeply understands creators and the reality of working with them. In this conversation, we're breaking down why brands still struggle to measure impact, what the brands getting it right are doing differently, and how creator marketing can actually connect to real business outcome. Sabrina, nice having you today. How's everything going?
It's good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
A pleasure. My pleasure. Everything's good here. It's a sunny afternoon in Argentina, so after this, I'm planning to enjoy a bit of the sun.
Yeah, same here. I'm right outside of Philadelphia. It's like in the 70s today, so I'm looking
Nice.
forward to going for a little walk after this.
Perfect. Sabrina, obviously, I just introduced you at a very high level, but tell us, how do you introduce yourself these days?
Okay, yeah. So I say, I sit at the intersection of brands and creators. And so it's been really exciting throughout my career to kind of take the journey, starting in like traditional media, now working in the social and influencer landscape. And so, yeah, I would say my job isn't just the partnerships, it's more of translation between brands and creators who often speak like different languages. So I just kind of help align them.
Yeah, that was actually my next question. Obviously, I also mentioned a bit about your journey in the media space, but tell us a bit more about your role at Beacons today as a head of partnership. What does your role actually look like, and what's been taking up most of your attention lately?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the reasons that I wanted to join Beacons is because Beacons was actually built for creators first. And so, working on the brand side for the last however many years in the creator space, I know how important the creator partnerships are to the brands. And so, I was really excited to kind of take on the challenge to come to Beacons and help them build out this brand side platform that'll help creators connect with brands and help the brands find the real creators who will drive real impact for them. So it's a really exciting time here. For the past few months, we've been really focused on building something that stands out in the market. The landscape moves really fast. The
Yeah.
creator space is maturing. And so that's kind of what drove me to Beacons and just really helping kind of take that next phase of the company. So yeah.
Now, you just mentioned how excited you're about the industry right now. And actually, before we kick our conversation about brands, I wanted to understand your perspective on the industry today. What's your thesis on the creator economy, and what excites you the most about where it is today?
Yeah, I think we've entered this new era where creators were before they were thought of as sort of like their own individual media channels. And I think that that is still true, but they're also this distribution from the brand side. And the creators that are winning today are building real businesses. It's really exciting to see people like Alex Earl getting a TV show on Netflix and just watching them become these real business people. Like just 6 years ago, when we were, in the earlier days of TikTok and the pandemic kind of accelerated things, we didn't know this is kind of where this would take us. And so I see that the brands that are really winning now are treating creators more like partners and not like media
Yeah.
placements, if you will. I think that the power shift has been pretty fascinating that like now creators own their audience, right? And they own their IP, and that's been changing everything, and it's really been exciting to see.
Absolutely. Let's go deeper into that because I remember when we last chatted, we were discussing a lot about how the conversation with brands have changed compared to previous years, maybe. So when you first started working in the space, how different was that conversation with brands
Oh
compared to
yeah.
what it looks like now?
Yeah, yeah. It's so different. When I first started, the phrase influencer marketing still seemed so new to brands. In fact,
Yeah.
most brands that I worked with in the early days of the pandemic, for instance, didn't have a TikTok presence, or they themselves, the media buyers, the marketing teams, they weren't even using TikTok. And so a lot of it was around education about what is influencer marketing and what is TikTok and how can these platforms really help me. I mean, the beauty and fashion creators had really like built a strong presence, but then we started seeing a lot of new verticals, and just like the explosion of people like Mr. Beast. He'd been around for forever, but suddenly he was like really taking off and he was building his own thing. And so the early days, the conversation was very much educational. It was like, let's test this like influencer thing. We'll look at some vanity metrics. And it was very like the mindset was very much like testing kind of like a new media channel.
Okay.
And now it's actually like in a real marketing plan. There's real budgets. Brands have hired, almost every brand out there has someone who's handling influencer marketing, where before it was, influencer was just kind of like underneath another team. And now there's actual full influencer teams dedicated to working with creators, and the partnerships are longer term. There's performance expectations now that I think weren't there before, but I think it went from experimental. That's been kind of the biggest shift to now there's like this internal infrastructure built inside of brands.
I would say experimental and almost like an afterthought, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was very much like, oh, well, maybe if we have some money left over from like our TV budget or, something like that. Whereas now, I think a big portion of brands' media or marketing budgets are going to influencers or some sort of creators. Even like I talked to a brand yesterday and they said that they also don't just use influencers to promote their product, but they use them to create really cool UGC for their own channels. And so, we've seen a lot of that. Like, they've become production as well. They're not just promoters, but they're real creatives that are actually sitting down and they're thinking through how
100%.
they're going to represent. Yeah, so for sure.
And before we fast forward to the conversation about what works, what doesn't work, what feels broken today, I'd love to hear what have been the changes that really surprised you the most across your whole journey in the industry, for good or bad, and what you think still hasn't really changed.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've seen evolve that I've for the good is that I think in the early days of people testing influencer, and even once we hit sort of this stride where, okay, everyone's now working with influencers, I think one of the biggest challenges that was still out there was the brands being really prescriptive with the content and wanting every creator to create sort of the same thing or the same brief. And now that has really changed. That kind of like prescriptive control over the creative doesn't work anymore. And now people are loosening up and they're actually tailoring it to the specific creator, which I think works so much better. They're collaborating with the creators to see what works and doesn't work. They're even creating almost like mini episodes of, content. I sat on a really cool webinar with Gabriel from MCO Beauty last week, and it's fascinating what they're doing over there. They're tapping into creators who are really excited about their brand, and they're making these little episodes of, their own little mini series. And so that's been really exciting to kind of watch that. And I think that we've broken out of that, like, here's a brief and just follow this brief and make sure that you hit these talking points. And I've loved seeing the evolution of that because I think it's so important. This is what you're hiring them for. If you hired a celebrity to do something for you, you wouldn't tell them exactly how to say something
Yeah.
or how to look into the camera. So it's really cool to see the landscape evolving and seeing brands really embracing it and having fun with it.
Yeah, and I think related to that is not only the flexibility or the creator trust in the creative brief, but I also think that the evolution from one-off partnerships to thinking more long term, that's also been a huge good shift. Do you agree?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Totally. Yeah.
That's changed a lot. Sabrina, let's shift to talk about why creator marketing still breaks for brands. What's happening today? As we were discussing, it's obvious that creator marketing is now mainstream, but many brands still struggle to make it work internally. Why do you think that is?
I think sometimes the brands still get hung up on looking at creator marketing and measuring it the same way that they're measuring every other media channel. And it's really interesting because I started my career in traditional media. I started in radio. I was selling radio spots, and that kind of evolved into digital, which then evolved into social. And one thing that I noticed throughout my career was the people who were embracing the changes in the way that the landscape was changing in media were the brands that were really winning. And I think sometimes it's hard to understand all the little nuances that go into creator marketing because you're working with people. These are human beings. They're not pixels, right? So when you place a TV buy and you know exactly the impressions you're getting, it's very different than when you are working with 50 creators across different verticals, across different platforms. And I think sometimes when brands are still approaching it they're expecting this like immediate outcome or this
Yeah.
immediate ROI, that is still, I think, very broken in the industry, especially because affiliate marketing has really grown as well. And I think that people expect that a creator just posts a link and sales happen and that's it out of one post. And, it's actually quite a long process. There has to be a level of trust built within the creator's community. There has to be a level of trust built where they see the product several times. In traditional like mainstream marketing, I think the rule used to be
Seven
that
times?
7 times, I was just gonna say that a consumer has to hear or see the message 7 times, but no one takes the same consideration when it comes to traditional influencer marketing,
Crazy.
right?
Yeah.
They expect somebody just post a link, post about it one time, and the creators that I've seen that do really well and the brands I've seen do really well are the ones that are locking into those longer term partnerships, that are having patience and are giving it time and allowing the creator to really build the story, build the narrative. One of the reasons that I think Hailey Bieber was so successful with Rhode, outside of the fact that she's Hailey B, is that she built a community of trust. She built this story around Rhode,
Mm.
and she built a lot of trust within the community that by the time the product launched, everyone was ready for that product. And that's what I see kind of being the way that, the landscape or the brands are gonna win in this type of landscape. Because when you keep trying to treat it like you would treat a television buy or a
Yeah.
radio buy or a digital buy, it's just not the same. There's a lot of things that are, taken into consideration when working with
Yeah.
creators that are just very different.
Do you think that brands are slightly, I mean, there are a lot of amazing brands doing amazing things with creators out there, obviously, but do you think that largely they understand now that creator marketing is not a sprint, it's more like a marathon?
Yeah, I think we're definitely seeing that. I think over the past, I would say like 18 months specifically, there's definitely been more of a shift. There's also, listen, there's way more creators to actually work with too. It was really hard because maybe 6 years ago or so, we were all kind of tapping into the same pool of creators.
Now there's
Now
200 million creators out
there's
there.
2 million creators, like, that's insane, and so there's someone out there for everyone, and so it's so much easier now for a brand to be able to find even the craziest niche of person or,
Yeah,
pet influencers or, there what you can find something for everyone now, and so I think definitely now things are shifting for the
yeah.
good.
Yeah. Sabrina, we were talking before about this nice shift of brands realizing that they need to build trust and build create longer creator relationships and programs. When the brands start to do that, where do you think that the programs most often fall apart? From a brand perspective, of course. Is it strategy? Is it measurement or something else?
I think it really depends. I think sometimes it is in the strategy. I think that when I mentioned earlier, when brands are collaborating with the creators and coming up with the ideas with them, that works really good because sometimes when you try to go in with the strategy and you think that you know the strategy up front, it can fall apart there. I do think sometimes the expectations are uneven and it can fall apart in the measurement piece and say, oh, well, this creator didn't perform. But I think also there needs to be a lot of those types of conversations happening up front, which is why I love seeing brands like I mentioned MCO. I'm going to just keep giving them a shout out. Um, doing more collaborative partnerships with the creators and bringing them into those marketing meetings with them and bringing them into the creative brief and bringing them into the strategy sessions. And so it's really, I think that the more brands can do that up front, the less it'll fall apart on the back end. But yeah, I would say sometimes it is the misalignment of the strategy up front, the misalignment of the goals. It does happen. It happens in every media channel, marketing channel, the measurement. So, I just look at it as I try to explain to brands, like, if they feel that a campaign failed, I look at it as like, okay, let's look at the opportunity to figure out what we learned in the process so we don't make the same mistake again, right? Like, what did we learn about the audience? What did we learn that we didn't know before this campaign started? And then kind of use it as that opportunity to move forward. But yeah, I would say a lot of times it is somewhere between the strategy or the measurement.
Okay, let's dive deeper into the measurement part. What metrics do you think brands should actually be paying attention to versus the one they tend to over index on today?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting to look at, a lot of times traditionally people would look at things like the impressions or the CPM or the engagement. But one of the things that I started looking into was like, okay, well, if we got high engagement, what does that actually mean? Like, what's the quality of the engagement? What are the kind of themes that we're seeing in the performance? What are people saying about your brand? I think the things that I look for now is sort of like behavior driven, audience driven, not just like who can drive views, but I think brands are smarter in the way that they're handling their creator activations and they
Mhm.
have specific outcomes. And I don't know if just getting to like an impression or a view goal is the best thing to look at anymore. It's a compounding channel, right? Like the ROI will continue with repetition, but I think looking at the overall, audience segments and the audience behavior and kind of learning what something that you didn't know before you started the campaign about the brand, about the performance in itself are the things that I look to try and look at now and kind of moving away from, okay, great. So we'll definitely be able to hit your impression goal, but what are the other things that we're trying to achieve here? And so recently we did a really cool event for a brand for a product launch, and we increased their mentions just social listening wise by like 300% month over
Wow.
month. And what we learned from it wasn't just the types of creators that we partnered with or the event, but what we learned was the excitement around the actual product. And we learned that
Okay.
the way that the brand was talking about the product, presenting the product, the packaging of the product really stood out to the audience and got a lot of the excitement. That's what like stood out was like more about what was the behavior around it that caused this huge increase versus like, oh well, we used X creator here and X creator there and this one drove this many views and this one drove
Yeah.
this many views and kind of looking at that comparison. It was more about digging down into like what caused all the excitement that drove that huge
Mhm.
300% increase.
Not just focusing on a couple of metrics, right? It's a more holistic thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Sabrina, where do you see brands optimizing today, and what does that usually cost them in terms of performance or creator trust?
That's a good question. I would say like right now people I think are over optimizing a bit on that like short-term performance. I think that they again back to like what I was mentioning with like the affiliate, I still think that there's a bit of over optimizing there in okay, let's look at this creator might have drove this many clicks and so let's like try like we're expecting that they're going to drive this many clicks for us, right? And so I still think that you need to kind of like build that trust. And then I think also sometimes they over optimize on picking creators based on like lowest cost, for instance, instead of like the strongest audience alignment. Those are places that I think that they could kind of change some of those habits as well.
Yeah. I want to talk, Sabrina, about something that I know comes up a lot in these conversations with brands and in the campaigns, obviously, which is brand safety. From your experience, what are brands most worried about when it comes to working with creators? Because we all know brand safety, but I guess that doesn't mean the same for every brand.
No, 100%. I think in terms of brand safety, it's so interesting. We were literally just having this conversation internally yesterday. I think the thing about social media, I always say is like it's a gift and a curse, right? We have so much information at our fingertips anymore so quickly. And so I think the number one thing that brands are nervous about is getting canceled, right? Do they align with a creator who kind of goes rogue and starts talking about something that could be seen as controversial? I know there's been a lot of discourse on social itself about brands that don't want to align themselves with creators who are more politically
Mm.
active or outspoken. And, you know, and from a brand's perspective, and if you talk to brands, like you can understand because it's hard to walk that kind of like that line of, do we just go all in and we like let the creators do their thing and, we just face the backlash or do we not, And I think a lot of brands have learned over the past few years, like they've learned big lessons about
Oh
getting
yes,
involved in conversations. And so I
definitely.
think that's still the number one thing. I think right now, there's a lot going on in the world. And I think brands are really scared to align their brand with something that, like you may think it's really cool to see a brand aligning with someone, and I may have a difference of opinion. And then they're like, okay, so if you're both our customer, how do we make you both happy? So I think that's still the number one thing that brands are really scared of is like if we align with someone, are they going to represent our brand values? Are they going to maybe go off script one day and it's hard to monitor that. You could partner with somebody and you could have been partnering with them for a really long time and then they, all of a sudden get online and start going on some
We've
crazy
seen that
rant.
happen too, right?
It happens all the time. It happens every day. And then the brand didn't have anything to do with it, but they get caught up in like the backlash of all of it. And so I think it's a hard thing to be in that position. And then I think on the creator side, I think creators, they face kind of the same thing. How do they stay what's considered brand safe while also being able to create the content that's resonating authentically with their audience and their community? And they want to be able to speak up about things and not lose brand deals. So I still think it is like TBD on how we
Yeah.
get through that. But yeah, I would say it's still the number one thing when it comes to brand safety of what brands get nervous about.
Yeah, I guess then the question is, what's the workaround, right? How can brands think about brand safety in a way that protects the business without stripping creators of the freedom that makes the partnership work in the first place?
Yeah, totally. And that's the ongoing challenge. I know for a fact last year I was running campaigns for brands and there was a creator that they absolutely loved working with and she started to speak up more on her channel about politics, which she had never spoken about
Mm.
before, but it was like understandable given some of the topics she was covering and the brand was like, "Man, we really love working with her, but we don't want to get in the middle of that." And I said, I think that there's still a way that we could try to work with her and just kind of like talk to her about like what's the best way to like move forward. So I would just say to have the conversation with the creators, right? Have the conversations with them and figure out a way to come up with a solution. And you're not always going to come to a solution. The solution might be, hey, we have to end our partnership with you, right? But at least you're having conversations. But I do think that there are ways that you can get around it and you can really work with the creators and make everyone happy. But it
Yeah.
is one of those things that's like still a work in progress. I don't know that anybody has like figured out a magical answer. And
No,
we're
but
all just like humans doing
absolutely,
life.
absolutely. But I do agree what you just said. It's about having those conversations, right? And I I think that's precisely why doubling down on long-term relationships and partnership is so important. So you can build
Yeah.
that relationship and have those conversations, right?
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, you wanna be able to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, let's have a conversation about this," you know? You want to feel like you guys can have, like, a productive conversation around it and figure out a solution. Yeah.
Before you mentioned something about what winning brands are doing differently today. So I have a whole bunch of questions about it. Tell us from your vantage point, what are the brands that are actually winning in the space doing differently today?
Um, I would say number 1, they're creating those long-term partnerships.
Yeah.
I would say they are not looking at creators as just a media channel or another media channel, I should say. I would say that they also are, they're embedding themselves with the creator, right? So we were just talking about, like, building the long-term partnership, but, they're bringing creators into the conversation of partnering on giving them some sort of like, ownership. And we've seen brands be doing that more recently where they actually get the creators invested in the brand. I would say that's really cool to see because then the creator actually feels like, oh, this is actually a business deal for me as well. Like I have a vested interest. I would say also just like being able to bring the creator in to the conversations quicker when it comes to strategy and, how they're going to put together briefs and things like that. Um, yeah, I would say like the number one like piece of advice that I give to brands always is that, don't look at the creator as just another marketing channel. Look at them as this like long-term storyteller for your brand. And you guys need to
Okay.
be able to talk about like what the story is going to be. And when you set that partnership up from the beginning like that, often we always see it becomes successful. So I would say like those are just kind of a few things that I've seen.
Is there anything that you think these winning brands seem to understand better about creators that others maybe still miss?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people understand like their audience behavior, for instance, like they get to understand like what works and doesn't work for the brands or for the creators and their audience. Like what do they respond to? Perfect example is like there's a creator that I follow and he does a trip where he brings his followers and the brands they embrace that, right? He works with the brands to bring his followers instead of them going on, like, big brand trips,
Mhm.
right? Because I think a lot of people are the everyday person is tired of seeing all these people get to go on all these, like, fun, Fiji vacations, right? Like and
Take me
so
with you. I
right,
wanna go.
so this creator, Brand Flakes out of Philly, he decided that he was gonna actually bring the brand trip to his followers, right? And he got a ton of the brands to support him and be a part of that, and I think brands that understand that and understand that it is at the end of the day, it's about the audience and the consumer and give back to the
Okay.
consumer and really give them something to be excited about. And so I think he's going to be doing it again. It'll be a second year, but I've seen other creators like follow suit from him and be able to give back to their community as well. And I think when brands integrate themselves into that, and it's not just about what the creator's posting or whatever, but it's like, what can we also do about the for the audience that's going to be exciting? And how do we start to bring them into the conversations? I've even seen brands that reward their biggest customers by bringing them on their own little influencer trip. So I think that the brands that are doing those things are the brands that are really winning and they really understand not just the creator but the actual audience and their consumer.
Yeah. Sabrina, let me ask you this as we head, and we were talking about just how it's March already. I can't believe the year has flown by. But as we head into 2026, what's the biggest shift that you think brands need to make if they want, creator marketing to actually scale?
I mean, I feel like almost I'm beating a dead horse now when I say this, but I do truly believe in like building those longer term partnerships and stop looking at creator marketing as just this like media channel, but what other things can it do for you? For instance, was just having this conversation with a brand partner, and we were talking about influencers' rates, and they said, "Well, why?" is this
With another
influencer's
thing.
yeah, exactly. Like, why is this influencer's rate so high? And I said, well, the way that an influencer works for you is you only see the small outcome of it, right? You only see the post, but
Yeah.
they're putting so much work in behind the scenes. They're now, your production, they're your creative. They're doing all of that work that if you were doing a television commercial, for instance, like you would hire all of these people, right? You would hire a full production team, you would hire makeup, and you would hire, all of these different people that would help
You're
you.
spinning into a full media company.
Exactly, and so the creator is your media company, and so their prices reflect that, right? It reflects the time because you don't want a creator to create something really fast for you or not do a good job. You're expecting high quality from them, and so you need to take in a lot of those factors into the pricing. There's a bunch of other things that go into pricing as well, but that was the main thing that I was trying to drive home to them, and once we had that conversation, they were like, yeah, you know what? That does make sense because we do spend a lot of money on a media company that helps us
Yeah.
shoot our TV spots. So that does make sense. And I think if I had like one kind of like piece of advice for brands in 2026, it would be to kind of look at that. Look at it differently. Look at when you're building this partnership with your talent, the creators that you're working with, look at all of those factors, not just that they're going to make some pretty posts for you and that,
Yeah.
they're going to be fun to work with, but all of the different things. They host events. You can utilize their content on other channels on your owned and operated socials. You can use it in your paid channels. You can use it in TV spots. You
Yeah.
can use it on digital streaming. So there's so many other ways that you can work with them through the distribution of it. So you need to look at them also as like their own media company and not just a media channel. So yeah, that would be kind of one of the biggest shifts that I'm starting to see actually is people taking that into consideration now. Yeah.
Mhm. I know you shared a lot of insights, advices, and things that brands should be paying more attention to. But if a brand leader is listening to this and takes just one thing away from our conversation, what should it be?
I would say start treating creator marketing as a core marketing channel.
What it
Um
is?
Yep, that is what it is. Start I said this in another podcast, but I'll say it here. I want to see Super Bowl money, right? Like I want your Super Bowl budgets. Start
Yeah.
looking at it because you can probably reach more audience through creator marketing than you can now with the Super Bowl and at a much more efficient rate. I mean, look at what DoorDash did around their activation this year with pre-Super Bowl with 50 Cent. They took the budget that they were gonna spend in the Super Bowl, and they put it into their creator marketing around,
Yeah.
ordering for the big game, and so that's what I would say. Start looking at it as a core marketing channel. Stop looking at it as sort of this, like, offshoot of social, and really start integrating it into the bigger budgets, the bigger dollars, because I think it will pay off way more for you in the long run.
100%. Sabrina, this was a great conversation. Thank you
Yeah,
so
I love
much
talking with
for
you.
yeah. Thanks for taking the time and for sharing your perspective. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
To
of course.
everyone listening, that's it for today's episode. Thanks as always for tuning in. We'll be back soon with more insights and conversations from across the creator economy. Talk soon. Bye, Sabrina.
Bye.